Wendy Overton, welcome to Lingofest. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for inviting me, Ahmed. It's nice to be here.
You bet, you bet. Wonderful. So as I was telling you before we started, we're all about making sure people know that many folks who are involved in NFTs are doing interesting things, but also things that are solving real problems. So maybe before we get into that, tell us, or within that context, tell us why you guys got into NFTs, and what problem you're solving, and what company you're part of, and so on.
Sure. I'm Wendy Overton. I'm COO of Iconic Moments, and we are a NFT marketplace for the 450,000 museums and cultural institutions around the world. We've been in the museum space for about six years now, and our original product through our parent company, Pass It Down, was a digital storytelling project that lets museums convey the importance of their digital assets and engage visitors via the web or in their facilities via touchscreen. The COVID-19 shutdowns, however, showed us that the museums, their business model is broken. It's based on in-person ticket sales and galas, and their digital footprint is usually, it's a website that doesn't generate it doesn't generate revenue, and it doesn't give them a way to truly further their mission. Around the time of the end of 2020, we began to explore whether or not NFTs would be a good fit for the cultural institution, and began having conversations with a number of our museum partners, and they were very interested in it. The blockchain's an excellent way of conveying provenance. All transactions are recorded on the blockchain, and that is the work of the archivist, is to track the provenance of the assets that they're responsible for. But they found themselves feeling very lost about this cutting edge technology. And we realized that we could be the interface to help them engage with the blockchain, preserve cultural heritage, and find a way to provide revenue that can help them support their mission.
Wonderful. So let's walk through it. How would money be created through NFTs in this particular context?
Well, when an NFT is issued on the blockchain, there's a transaction. The transaction of some sort, because there's a perceived value that's set there. We will be issuing the NFTs and then providing a revenue split back to the museums that will provide sustaining funds for them. Every time that the NFT changes hands again, there's an additional revenue split. Mm-hmm. So that's an area that is really fascinating for those that care about the creative assets, the historical assets of our world, because in the past, creatives, when they created something, they only got to sell it once and they don't get revenue in return after that one sale. But because the blockchain tracks provenance, we can continue to provide revenue every time that asset increases in value, that it changes hands. The revenue will continue to go back to fund the museum operations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's fascinating. Let's do an example. Okay, so I live in McLean, Virginia. McLean, Virginia is a suburb of Washington, D.C., right? And I'm thinking, you know what? What if I want to create a museum here, right? Because a lot of congressmen here and live here, and political personalities. And let's say I create a museum and I sort of marketed it, and since I live in DC, I can go to the staff and all and say, hey, you know, if you or I can find people who live in DC who can give some artifact, right? And this is the artifact from, you know, what's his name? Dick Cheney actually lives here. And so let's say an artifact from him, right? So I created a museum of that, McLean Museum. Now I, as the owner of the museum, would want to sustain it, right? I want to make sure that I have a budget for it. And let's say the community of folks here said, this is a worthwhile cause, because actually it's really, and for example, Ethel Kennedy lived here, right? So I'm sure if it existed back then, they could have donated something. It would have been, in other words, I can create a museum locally. Okay,
Right.
tell me how I would be able to monetize it. With folks who live in McLean sort of buy an NFT of some artifact and say, okay, I'm doing this because I want to, number one, I want to sustain this museum, but number two, at the same time, I want to sort of invest in it because I think this thing, which is worth maybe, which I paid for $200 now, may be worth a lot more in the future. Is that sort of the kind of
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So like in the beginning of the NFT like growth, people were just selling a JPEG as a
yeah.
digital certificate of ownership. But over time, there's become a lot of creative ways that that this technology is being used, where utility is being embedded into the token itself. So for instance, you could have an NFT that is essentially a membership to the museum, where people that own the NFT now have an annual or or access to a gala of some sort. You could use the NFT token for some sort of other opportunity. You could use the NFT to have access to a certain auction. You could have like an online silent auction, and your NFT becomes your access pass to come into that. You could create a digital experience online that your NFT creates some sort of tokenized experience. I just saw one today where using Unity and other game design. Now this is kind of getting outside the museum, but you could have a space that provides a digital experience museum, and the Web3 component is you connect your wallet to this website, and that becomes your entrance into this digital experience. Metaverse is basically like code for a game, so you can do a lot of things you game design in that way.
No,
but
I think
there's a lot of utility that you can build into these. You can track the ownership of them.
Okay. So in this case, there are actual physical artifacts, right, that I'm collecting, and maybe I'm taking, and so there's like the membership to the museum, right, that enables me to do my job, and then folks get an NFT of the membership, so it's kosher, meaning if they, let's say, if they want to transfer that membership to somebody else, can they do that?
It all depends on what rules they want to build into the smart contract, but yes, they could.
Yeah. Tickets, right? Tickets obviously are a big thing for events. I'm fascinated by the notion, I'm intrigued by the notion of events in this metaverse, right? In virtual, right? So you could have pictures of all these things, and actually, it's not even expensive. I investigated to like build like a showroom. It's not that expensive. To have a developer build you a showroom, and you can upload it to to Facebook, whatever it's called, and go and people can either they enter, and maybe if they want to perhaps purchase one of the items, right? If you have like each item has maybe 10 unique NFTs you can purchase and you can own, right? Is that
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with the technology, and some of them will be things that are yet to be built. But that's the beauty of this technology, is that there's a lot of people coming up with very creative applications of the technology.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really important to keep in mind, is like there's a lot of hype around whether or not NFTs are legit, right? This idea that it's a fad. The thing is, I think people are focusing on the wrong thing. They're looking at a picture of some cartoon ape and going, well, this isn't legit. The reality is that the technology itself is extremely sound, and it's very interesting. And there was a survey recently of developers themselves, the people that are building Web3, and those that have done some sort of coding in the blockchain. They are very excited about the technology. They see tremendous potential, and that's where I think you're going to see a lot of innovation beginning to happen there. We're just beginning to see some of the applications of this. You know, go back to like the 90s. Remember when everyone was asking each other, like, what's the internet? It's just a fad. Like, it's not a fad. Okay, maybe it wasn't a good idea to sell dog food on the internet back then.
There was a lot of
yes.
You're right. There was a lot of that for sure. Yeah.
There was a lot of that. There's a lot of that. Like, who wants to buy things on the internet? That's ridiculous. You know, I don't want to buy my things on the internet.
My credit card. I'm going to give my credit card on the internet. Are you crazy?
Exactly. So we are at that moment of this technology, and like capture all these naysayers and put them in a box, because it's going to be hilarious in 30 years.
Not even 30 years. I think it's like 5 years, because technology goes fast. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was thinking of the same thing. Like eBay, I remember, like, are you crazy? And there's no way I'm going to bid people. Or even recently, I mean, we are always bumping against the limits of our imagination, right? Even recently, like Uber, like, what? I'm going to get into somebody's car?
Yeah.
And then
Airbnb. Why would I want to stay in someone's place? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Yes.
Yeah. Or why would I rent my place to strangers, right? You know, and so, yeah, I think it's the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem. Once it gets starts to come together, then things start clicking. It's amazing. Like, I remember, like 2 years before Uber went mainstream, there was a lot of skepticism. And then I remember, like, I had a moment where I'm in the airport and I'm seeing all these people, right? Uber, running around, right? These are folks who didn't know anything, that Uber didn't exist, and then all of a sudden they adopted it and it became part of their life, and they were totally blasé about it. Like, I'm continue to be stunned by how Uber works, right? To be honest with you, right? The logistics of it and all, the fact that a car shows up, oh my God! I mean, and you can see it coming. I mean, I will never be blasé, but I think a mark of success is
When I first learned that I could send money to somebody with their email address on PayPal, I was like, that doesn't make sense. It's not possible.
It's not possible.
PayPal was a thing, and now we have Venmo and all these other ways of transferring money that are not going through the traditional banking system, and it's fascinating. So
it is. I think, I think as you said, I think there's plenty of concepts that we are not even aware of right now that will emerge, right? Ideas. And I think one thing you said, which is really interesting, I think I'm going to add it as one of my talking points moving forward, is that you said that developers actually believe in it. And then so if anyone knows developers are very cynical, they smell a rat from far away more than anyone else. They hate business people, they hate fakeness, they hate all of that. So if a developer tells you that something is real, listen to them, right? Because they're not going to
BS you. Yes,
it's true. I mean, it's true. Developers are really very, very much about what is true and what is real, and so on. So thank you for that talking point. I'll definitely add it. So if we were, let's just sort of like pin it down, and we find somebody who's very skeptical, and we're telling them about, the internet, and sort of we want to lean on that. There was a fad in social media. We all thought it was a fad, and they're like, still, this one is actually really, really a fad. Those were not fad. I was wrong. I'm okay. But here, I'm pretty sure it's a fad.
This one's a fad. The other ones.
The other ones were, I meed those people all the time. But how do we like go about like saying, okay, what would we say to convince them, to at least not convince them that this is just to start looking into it without just completely dismissing it, which is 99% of the people right now. If they have heard of it, they're dismissive of it.
Yeah.
How
there's a number of angles that I could take there. Like, in terms of just signals of where I think this is going. The big investment firms, they have a lot of money involved in this, and like billions of money, billions of dollars in this. And that is a signal, because those people are very forward thinking. They're highly tapped into the most cutting edge of technology and the potential of it. So while that doesn't necessarily counteract a cynic per se, but if I'm looking at where an industry is going, if you look at where those big VC funds are putting their money right now, it's in Web3. And that alone should be at least a signal for someone to pay attention and say, well, maybe there's something there I don't know about. Like maybe I don't fully understand this, because those people have billions of dollars at stake right now. Another thing that I would say to a cynic is, I think right now we're only seeing the emergence of the technology, and they need to not focus on, the iterative whales and dolphins that are happening, and look deeper down to what this is practically trying to accomplish. In some respects, this idea of providence is very powerful. It allows true ownership and creatives to continue to own what they issue. There's applications that are yet to be discovered, but every day there's a new innovation that's coming out, and so it's easy to see that this is going to continue on because it's exciting and it's fun, and there's money to support this progress that's happening. And then in terms of just the actual practical applications, I think once we get past some of the hype, we're going to settle into some really practical applications. Like this may become the way that we now sign up for software as a service or our memberships. Like this is something that could become very easily the new way that these things are tracked, because they have this additional utility built in that far exceeds our current tool set that we have for our traditional online e-commerce experience.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you gave me a second point I'm going to use, which is okay. We are going to live in a virtual world more and more, right? I think, right, we're going to be able to do a lot of things virtually, and I think it's neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's just it's going to happen. For example, 2 years from now, I mean, 2 years ago, I used Zoom only when I was under duress, right? Sort of. Otherwise, I would go virtual. I'll go for real. Meet people even for a coffee, right? Which, I mean, again, not good, not bad. It's just how it was, right? But now I'm very comfortable with Zoom. Totally comfortable. I used to do Zoom. I didn't use video, right? I just used voice, right? But now,
you're a voice expert, so that's
well, there you go. Exactly. So that's how I justified it. I'm like, okay, I don't do that because I'm a voice guy, but now I'm very comfortable, right? And I'm not the kind of guy who likes to, I'm not a gregarious kind of a guy, even though I may seem so, but it changed. I changed me, right? I changed, because the technology is here, and then sort of I evolve in that sense. I think we'll be able to meet sort of with those goggles, perhaps in an office, and be able to do things where we're emulating, perhaps. I don't know. I'm just thinking that I'm pretty sure that our future has a heavily digital virtual presence to it, and a lot of things are going to happen of value. And so how do you transact there quickly? It cannot be, I gotta wait for 3 days for my money to come in. It's got to come in right now, right? It's got to be boom boom, right? So I think, and that's already happening in games, for example. People are able to quickly do transactions, and so I think that's probably another dimension to
the Web3 to me starts to put the power and the ownership back to the people who, like, it's their data, it's their information, as opposed to being centralized and owned by, Facebook or these other organizations. Web3 is about, owning those parts of the internet yourself again, and that's a really interesting phenomenon. And I think it's in some ways getting a little bit more real world with how we currently live our lives. Like, we expect to own our own domain, and that's what I think Web3 is going to create for us.
I think it's interesting how we went from non-cloud to cloud, and I think now we're going back to non-cloud, because the cloud has shown its minuses. It has a lot of pluses, obviously. So I agree. I think a lot of the data that now is just living out there, who knows where it is. We're gonna have a lot more, control over it. I hope.
Yeah.
As we move forward, because that's a big issue. Okay, so what your website is? Can you tell the folks where they can find you?
Iconicmoments.co. And we are a subsidiary of Pass It Down, but please visit us on iconicmoments.co.
Moments. Okay, there will be a page with this video that will have all the elements, and offline I'll get all that information from you.
Thank you.
But is there anything you want to tell the folks about NFTs, or anything that you want to highlight in terms of what you guys are doing that's coming up? Anything exciting?
Well, so like our mission is to help preserve heritage. Most of the, many of the NFTs that are coming out right now are focused on a current artist or a current moment, but there is a vast amount of history that needs to be preserved. About 1/3 of there's always risk of closure of our institutions, but the impact of the COVID-19 shutdowns put over 1/3 of the world's heritage institutions at risk of closing. Now, when they close their door, it means that the archives and the knowledge that they are the stewards of becomes at risk of being lost. So we'll be using the blockchain to help provide the sustaining funds to those institutions, but also to actually put those items, that information out onto the blockchain. And there's distributed ways of providing the, the visual and information as well. Like that's one of the issues of not issues, but criticisms of NFTs is that it is a digital certificate that points to an item, but there's also distributed file service like the IPFS that we'll be using, which will allow the world's heritage to be preserved on the blockchain.
Wendy Overton, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.